In this lesson we're going to take a new melody which I've got here, and we're going to apply some of the techniques we used in some of the earlier lessons in terms of harmonisation. So for the first harmonisation here, I've got the melody 3 times. For the first harmonisation we're just going to go through and apply the method used in lesson 1, using just chords 1, 4 and 5. So here is the melody. So similar to the melodies we have been using. What I'm going to do is just go through, as we did before, and choose chords for the notes of the melody. So chord 1, establishing G major as the key at the beginning here, in the key of G. For the C, using chord 4. For the D, using chord 5, or potentially chord 1. The D is in both chords. We'll put both in as possibilities for the moment. For the C, chord 4, chord 1, chord 5, chord 1. And that gives us a perfect cadence here at the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and insert bass notes for these chords. And I'm going to take the same approach we did before. I'm going to keep everything in root position to begin with. So this next one will be a C. I'll put it down the octave just to keep the spacing between the parts nice and big. Then we have a G, up the octave, C. Going for the chord 1 here to begin with, keeping the tonic chord there as much as possible. G, D, and G. Okay, so that was picking chord 1 here for this third note. Now if we have a look at our bass line, it's not really a line, it just leaps around a little bit too much. So what we could do is make this a D and decide to go for chord 5, so we get a little bit more shape into the line, and also that when we go to chord 4 we don't just go back to 1, we try to get to the dominant chord before ultimately going back to chord 1. This creates a problem, however, because we've got in the melody here C to D, and we've got C to D in the bass part. So one of the solutions for that we looked at was changing the inversion of the chord. Now we've got two consonant inversions of the chord. The root position the chord is constant, and the first inversion chord is constant. Remember, the second inversion is a dissonant chord. So what we could do is either have this chord 4 in first inversion, or we could take the chord 5 that we have here and put that into first inversion. I'm just going to take out this one here just to show we've definitely gone for chord 5. Now if we use the first inversion of chord 5, we have a little bit of a problem in the melody. The bass line is a little bit leapy, and also we've got C to F sharp, which is an augmented fourth. Augmented fourth is a melodic dissonance, so this is a melodic dissonance, so ideally we would avoid that. So what we'll do is we'll make the chord 4 the first inversion chord, and we'll leave chord 5 as root position, and that gives us a nice smooth bass line coming down here. Now if we look up here, we've got D to C in the melody, and we've got D to C in the bass, so that's parallel octaves as well. So we could take the similar approach and have first inversion chord 4 here. The other thing we could do at this point is, instead of using chord 4, of course, we could actually think about using chord 5/7. Remember, if you have the 4th degree in the melody, that will be the 7th and the dominant 7th chord. In this case that's a C. You see the C is the 7th and the dominant 7th chord. However, what we have to do is check that 7th is falling downwards by step. Remember that the 7 and the dominant 7 chord, or any 7 chord, really ought to fall down by step. So we've got the 7 here, we've got that coming down by step, so we can in fact use 5/7 here. So that is what we'll do. Change that to 5. In fact 5/7, and by having it as 5/7 we have 2 Ds now in the bass, so we don't have parallels with our melody. The other thing that we could do, we talked about in an earlier lesson, is making this 5/7 first inversion. That, you'll remember, is quite a strong progression for this 5/7 and first inversion going to the tonic chord, because we've got the 7 which is falling and we have the leading note rising, so there's a sense of the chord really wanting to get to chord 1 here. So what I'm going to do is, I've got my figure bass just below here, I'm going to pull that up just to show that that's chord 5, and the figure bass shows that it's a first inversion of the dominant 7 chord here, and I'll put the little 6 up there to show that that's first inversion of chord 4. So then we have our bass line now, with our harmony, and all I'm going to do now is use the top down method, and you remember I'm just filling the notes of the chord in by coming downwards to the next note available within the chord. Chord 1 here, G major. Doing the same here, this is chord 4. Coming down to the next note in chord 4, which is G. And coming down to the next note, which is E, but you remember that E is the third of the chord, and you remember the rule that we don't double the third, that's to say the middle note of the triad. So we've got C major here, E is the middle note, and you'll see that because this is first inversion, the E is already in the bass part. So what we're going to do is not double the middle note, bypass that E, and come all the way down to the C. Chord 5 there, straightforward. The dominant 7 chord has 4 notes. So we've got C, we've got F sharp. We just want to find the missing 2 notes there. So that's the missing 2 notes. And you'll notice that the third is in the bass, and then the third is not in the treble part here. Filling down these last few notes here. You'll remember also when we have chord 5 at the cadence, when we have the melody coming down, this bottom note of the 3 notes here coming down to B, this D, it is possible that we might put in a passing 7 to make, so we have the D coming down to the B here. I'll just take out this rest that's hiding there. Okay, so there's our basic harmonisation, using just the methods that we've been looking at in the previous tutorials, making use of the dominant 7 chord, using first inversion chords to avoid parallels, and using the top-down method. So let's have a listen. So that's it, fairly straightforward. So that was a bit of revision. What we're going to do now is look at this progression up here to the right of your screen. You'll see here that we talked about the dominant 7 chord in our revision example, that the 7 has to fall downwards by step. If you look at the example up here on the top right of your screen, you'll see that actually you've got the dominant 7 chord here where the C rises up, and this is the exception to the rule. We haven't talked about any exceptions yet. So here's our first exception to the rule. The 7 here rises upwards by step, and that is possible in a 7 chord, dominant 7 chord, when you have this particular progression. The melody is going 3, 4, 5, 3rd degree, 4th degree, 5th degree of the scale, and the bass is moving upwards by steps. So that's sort of similar to the passing 6/4 we have in the middle here, where we have the 3-2-1 and the 1-2-3 idea on the bass, and the melody going in constant motion. Here they're going in similar motion, 3-4-5, 1-2-3, and the middle chord is this dominant 7 chord with the 7 rising up. It's normal that chord will actually come on the weak beat. Remember that the passing 6/4 that we have here always comes in the weak beat, so it's strong, weak, strong. It's normal also for the rising 7 for that to be strong, weak, strong, but it doesn't have to be the case. This could actually come on the strong beats, with the chords either side being on the weaker beats, and that would be fine too. So what we're going to do is put this into practice. So we're going to take our melody here, you'll notice this melody goes 3, 4, 5. So what we're going to do is just pop 1, 2, 3 into the bass. It's chord 1, chord 5, 7 in second inversion, chord 1. And the figures for second inversion of the dominant 7 chord are 4, 3, and the first inversion indicated by the 6 there. Okay, and we're just going to take these notes and use the top-down method again. So this is the dominant 7 chord. We've got the C coming down by one note, by one to the next note in the chord, which is F sharp because we've got the A in the bass, and then the D. Then our chord 1 is in first inversion, so I'm not going to double the B because that's the third of the chord, the middle note of the triad. I'm going to come down to the G and then down to the D there. Okay, and that gives us our rising 7 chord. And for the rest of it, all I'm going to do is make my life straightforward. I'm just going to cut and paste what we originally had in here. I seem to have got myself a little rest hiding in there, so I'll get rid of that. Okay, so there we have it. So here's our rising 7 progression. When using the top-down method for the dominant 7 chord, again, all the notes have to be present. If you use the top-down method, as long as you go 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, top-down, it will work out nicely. So let's have a listen to how it sounds. Okay, what I'm going to do is take that progression, and in this third version of my harmonisation, I'm going to go to chord 4 at this point. Remember, originally I had chord 4 here, and the reason why I went to the 5, 7 in first inversion was to avoid the parallels. So what we're going to do here is just go back to chord 4. I seem to have an extra 1 in there. I'll just get rid of that. I'm going to use chord 4 here instead because the parallels are no longer a problem because we're coming now from chord 1 in first inversion. I'll put that 6 there to show that. So this B now rises up to the C like that, and I'll use my top-down method just to show the notes of that now. And that's quite a strong progression. This chord 1 first inversion rising up to chord 4 is quite a strong progression because of the B to the C is just a semitone. So it's quite nice to have 1 first inversion going to 4. Generally speaking, that works very well. I'm also noticing this is going 3, 2, 1, and it's cadential. I mean, it goes 3, 2, 1 at the cadence. I know there's the opportunity for my cadential 6, 4. Lower G there. So remember that's the cadential 6/4 where the chords go 1, 5, 1, but instead of 1 in root position I have chord 1 in second inversion. So it goes 3, 2, 1, 1 second inversion, chord 5, root position 1. And if I use my top-down method I'll get all the right notes of the chord. I'm actually just going to cut and paste that in from here, saves a bit of time. So that's just using the same notes using the top-down method that I had used over here. You'll notice the bass is D and D, and the bass is doubled. Remembering the rule that in the cadential 6/4 you double the bass part, and I've got the 7 coming down. However, there's a bit of a problem here with this 7 passing 7 coming down here, in that the 7 goes underneath this D. So what I'm going to do is put that D down the octave just to get it out of the way. And in fact I could put all of this down the octave, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep that up the octave because what I quite like is the fact that the bass line does that sort of trampoline effect of the octave leap and back up to the tonic of the tonic note. Okay, so there we have it. We've got three harmonisations. The first one used some of the early ideas that we've been looking at. This second harmonisation and third harmonisation introduces the rising 7 progression, which is quite an important progression to remember. And the third harmonisation uses that with the cadential 6/4 at the end. I suppose you're probably asking which one is correct, which one is best. Well, it's not so much which one is correct, it's are they not incorrect, is the way we should think about it. Do they have any problems? Well, this one, the first one, second, third one here, none of them have any problems. They're all good. They're just different, and they're all are equally good. It's just it's a matter of personal preference as to which one you like. So we'll listen to them each one in turn. I think my personal preference is probably the third one, and I'll tell you why that is. I actually like the way this bass line goes all the way up to the D here as the melody arches back. So there's a sense of contrasting shape between the parts. The climax, if you like, of the melody is here, and the climax of the bass is right at the cadential 6/4. So I actually quite like this one, but you may prefer another one, and that's absolutely fine. It's good to be able to vary these things. Something to note, you may be wondering why we wouldn't use the cadential 6/4, say, in this example, or indeed in this first example. And the reason for that is, if we use the cadential 6/4 here and here, we're ruining the effect we'd set up with our dominant 7 chord in first inversion, where the F sharp rises up to the tonic and the 7 falls to the bass. That was the whole point of using the first inversion dominant 7 chord. They had that sense of the leading note rising to the tonic, so we would actually ruin the effect of that. And in general, the leading note should rise to the tonic when it's either in the melody or the bass part. So if it's in the outer parts, the leading note really ought to rise to the tonic. It has that tendency. So actually, let's listen to this first example with the 6/4 version of the cadence, the cadential 6/4 here, but listening carefully to this F sharp not resolving. It's just that little bit weaker, isn't it? So we'll just put that back up to the G. So we have everything nicely as we had it before. So that's the lesson finished. Bit of revision here. New harmonic formula, if you like, procedure, the rising 7 used here, and recapping here the cadential 6/4.